Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's topic is really important to me and it's something that I'm actually currently working on right now, and it is about boundaries and personal power. I really believe that this is such an important concept and that everyone should learn about it and everyone should really think about it. So many people, I think, have this issue of being people pleasers or putting other people first instead of themselves. But as we know, even in airplanes, when there's a turbulence and the oxygen mask drops, they will tell you to first put it on yourself and then put it on the other people next to you. So it is really important to first take care of yourself in order to be able to give to others. And this is not only done in a physical sense, like taking care of yourself physically with your basic needs, but it should also be done with your energy, protecting your energy. And the reason why boundaries are so important is that it's like a house. Our body is the house, right? So we want, when we have a nice house, when we our property, we usually put a fence around it, and we don't want anyone to just come in. Some people put even alarms and cameras, and they're really protecting their property. So boundaries are kind of the same. We really want to make sure that our house, our body is the treasure, and it's not you know, ransacked or just demolished by other people. And it's the same. So we need to protect ourselves, and that is critical to self-compassion and self-love. If we just let anyone and anybody come in as they please and do whatever they want, then that is not showing that we respect ourselves. So if we don't respect ourselves, how can other people respect us? Most of the times, people who don't believe that for some reasons they are not worthy of love or of deserving, they maybe think that someone needs to come and show them why they're worth it. So they're waiting for that person to make them believe that they are worth it. But these things cannot come from external validation. They can only come from inside, internal validation and our own acceptance. The only important person is ourselves in this case. So first of all, what are boundaries? Boundaries are the limits and the rules that we set for ourselves in order to have relationships with other people. Let me clarify. A boundary could be, I don't want to be touched unless I say it's okay. That's a limit that I'm putting, like a fence around myself, that it's relational. So how do boundaries actually work and why do we have them? Boundaries are necessary because, first of all, they protect us. And second of all, they create like a safe space for the person to feel okay to deal with other people. How do they work? Basically, we have a thing called the prefrontal cortex, which is the area that is of the brain that is in charge of taking in the information from the outside world. So when this information from the outside world, which is usually stimuli, is taken in by the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, which is the, let's call it the center of emotions, it's like the center which reacts to this information and will give a different response based on past experiences. The amygdala can either process it normally, okay, it's just a stimuli, it's giving us this information, move on, or it can give a reaction of danger, threat. And consequently, this can have three different behaviors as a result. It could be a fight behavior response, it could be a freeze, or it could be a flight behavioral response. But all of these three signal a stress, a reaction, a protective reaction to something that we perceived as danger. And that's fine when this is a serious real situation. For example, this used to help us when we were chased by a tiger. This used to help us when we weren't sure about the other person. Is it a friendly person or does it want to attack me since it has a spear? And that signaled to our body that we needed to be ready to fight, flight, or freeze, basically. And that's fine. But in our modern world, there are not many physical dangers or so many stimuli which are actually a real threat. Most of them are perceived threats that are perceived by the amygdala as stressors, but it's only because of our past experiences. So basically, we had a past trauma, the amygdala remembers it and links this information that is taken from the outside as this trauma. And that's why we have this reaction. Now, the boundaries are important because, first of all, they allow us to have a safe space and to set the rules for the interaction with other people and with ourselves. But if they are overstepped, like I am saying, I don't want anyone to touch me unless I'm fine with it, but somebody oversteps them, so basically I have a fence around me, but this person enters the fence without my consent, then of course I will feel threatened and I will feel in danger. So that's why my response will be the fight, flight, or freeze response, depending on a lot of things. For example, my upbringing and the situation, and a lot of other influencing factors. One important and interesting fact is that the amygdala can regulate the distance from others even when we don't feel, see, or hear them. We don't need to be near the stimuli, but we can also but the amygdala will still perceive it and will still have the reaction. The issue is that when the amygdala is too reactive and when danger response is way too active, then every stimuli can feel like a threat. And of course, it is not healthy for the body to be always in the stress response because it will raise the stress hormones in the body, in the blood, and we are not meant to always be in fight mode. That's only when it is really necessary, not all the time. Usually, when the amygdala is always reactive and everything is perceived as a danger, even though it is actually not a danger or a threat to our life, that's usually when it's a trauma response. So it is really important to calm the amygdala down. So what are the types of boundaries? There are many different ones. First of all, they are categorized in three broader categories. They are rigid boundaries, permeable boundaries, and flexible boundaries. Rigid boundaries are boundaries that are set and that are not so easily changed. To give an example, I could have an object, for example, let's say my phone. So I have my phone and my boundary is that nobody touches my phone. In any case, in any situation, it's mine and nobody ever touches it. That's a really rigid boundary. Nobody ever touches my phone. Then we have permeable boundaries where they are very fluid and they're not there basically, so they could also not exist. For example, with my phone, everyone can do what they please with the phone. They can take it, they can use it without asking me permission. So the boundary is basically almost non-existent and it can be overstepped easily by other people. And then we have the flexible boundaries, which are basically depending on the situation. So yes, I don't want my phone to be touched because it's my property, for example, and it's my private phone. But if it's necessary, I can lend it to someone to make a call, or if someone needs to search something and they don't have their own, I can lend it to them. So it is a boundary which is there are rules, but I am also able to see the situation and be flexible about it. Then there are different boundaries depending on the area. So there are the physical boundaries, which are the most important ones. Basically, they are the ones that regulate how we deal with our body and permission to use our body. So like I said, I don't want anyone to touch me, for example. Then we have the boundaries relating to property. So what are the limits and the rules relating to my property, my house, my phone, my stuff. We also have the sexual boundaries. So what are the limits and rules in that area? We also have emotional relational boundaries. For example, an emotional relational boundary could be stepping out of a conversation or saying stop when it's too much, when it's too emotionally overwhelming. We also have intellectual boundaries. So for example, not discussing politics, religions with other people, or only with people that are trusted or chosen. And there are religious boundaries. For example, I need to do certain prayers at certain times, or I need to have certain rituals because of my faith. Then there are also time boundaries. For example, I choose, or my boundary is not to reply to work emails after work hours or during weekends or during vacation. Or I want to limit my time with my family because I am not 100% comfortable, so I will only participate to gatherings for a certain amount of time. Could be an example. So this is such an important topic, but it's not really talked about. And most of the times people either don't know their boundaries or the other people's boundaries, or they simply don't respect them. And there are many reasons why this happens. For example, one reason could be power dynamics. So there is a situation in which a person has more power, which could be real or perceived. Real could be, or real, let's say, authoritative power that is given by a position, for example, in a job, a boss and an employee. So on a human level, they are the same, but in the job field, one is higher hierarchically and the other one is lower. So basically, the boss has more power than the employee. What could happen is that because of this skewed power dynamic, the boss will not respect the employee's boundaries, and maybe the employee is scared about losing the job, or generally is scared of authority, scared of what this person can do. They will not speak up and they will not enforce their boundaries. So the boundaries of the employee are breached because of this skewed power dynamic. It could also be about perceived power. For example, in a marriage, or for example, in a household, when one person is perceived to wear the pants or have more power than the other, so they can prevaricate on the other people, and they are more likely to disturb or to breach these boundaries of the other people. Another reason could be the attachment styles. Once again, the childhood is really important in this case, because how you were raised and how your boundaries were respected and they were taught to you from your parents, then this will project on how we relate with other people. There are 3 different attachment styles. There is the avoidant attachment style, anxious, and secure. The avoidant attachment style is usually when we feel we don't need help from other people, we can do it all by ourselves. And we usually have issues with commitment or with close relationships. In that case, usually it gives rise to rigid boundaries because we are very into our own self and protective of ourselves. So we are very uncomfortable with a level of closeness, and that's why we tend to keep ourselves very apart from other people. And the way to do that is to put up very rigid fences. Then there is the anxious attachment style, where on the contrary, we are over dependent on people. We really depend on other people's opinion. We are really codependent. And because of that, we really want to please everyone. So our boundaries will be very permeable because we don't respect ourselves enough to have fences. Our fence is always open for anyone to come and go as they please. And finally, we have the secure attachment style, where actually where our boundaries are flexible and they are healthy. So we are able to gauge the situation and choose whether we are going to enforce the boundary to protect ourselves, or we're going to open the door to let someone in. Another reason why someone might not respect your boundaries is that they are a high conflict person. So for example, they are very reactive. Could also be very aggressive, or have limited emotional or physical self-constraint. Maybe they are reacting out of proportion, or they are dominated by negative emotions. So usually when somebody is into their reactive mode, it is harder for them to understand their own boundaries and other people's boundaries. So they might not even do it on purpose, but they will step over the fence without even realizing it. And the last reason is coercive control. So this is kind of tying to the first point of hierarchy, but in the first point it's more like a natural hierarchy, in the sense it's not really premeditated. For example, the boss enforcing his own will onto the employee's boundaries. Maybe it's not done on purpose, it's simply the design of the hierarchy is done that way that it's easier to do, and also the employee might let the boss do that. On the other hand, coercive control is when the person does it on purpose, so manipulates, keeps the person away from loved ones, creates a fear-based environment in order to keep the other person traumatized and isolated. So it is done, it is premeditated, and it is done on purpose. One thing that I really encourage you to do, and one thing that I'm also trying to do myself, is to understand and ask myself, what are my boundaries? Because before this, of course, I don't want to be touched unless I am okay with it, or I don't want someone to prevaricate with their power over mine. Intellectually, we understand that, but do we really understand it deep inside of us? Or is it just we understand it intellectually? So I asked myself, what are my boundaries in all those categories that I mentioned? And it was kind of hard sometimes to even come up with something, or to realize that I have this boundary or I don't. And I think it's really important to do that, and also to understand if that boundary is flexible, rigid, or permeable, to see where actually you're letting people in or where you're keeping people out, and trying to balance everything. Ideally, of course, some boundaries will always be rigid, and some boundaries might be permeable to some people because maybe they don't even care, and it's fine. But usually the boundary should be flexible. So we should be in control of when we open and close the gate. People shouldn't, I don't know, jump over it or forcibly open the door. I think it's important to mention is that when, for example, is that when people really care, or when people are more empathetic and sensitive, they might get caught up in situations with high conflict people, or with people who overstep their boundaries. And I think one of the important boundaries that we need to understand is that we have the right to step out, step back, and leave the confrontation. We don't always have to, confront the person or get swept into the argument or discussion. A boundary could also be that when it is too much, we step back and say, no, I am not going to partake in this. And that's something that I've always struggled with, honestly, because it feels rude to me to just leave. And also, I believe that most people are rational. So if you rationalize it with them or talk it out, people will understand. But I'm realizing more and more that that's not true. Some people just thrive on confrontation, vomiting all their anger, pushing all their anger and prevaricating on other people. They just enjoy it, and that's fine. Some people are like that, but we don't need to partake in that. We can step back and say, I'm not going to. One thing that is connected to this that we can do when we feel it's a high stake situation, and it's also, we don't have to respond. We can also just use the Grey Rock method, which I've read in a book, and it's something that I've actually tried myself before reading about it, and it really worked. If someone is very, aggressive and confrontational, you can just pretend to be a rock. So give them no response at all, no emotion, no nothing. Just be like a gray rock, do nothing. So be unresponsive, don't give them any emotion, any reaction, and they will leave. And it really works. So it's important to not over justify ourselves. So we don't need to give explanation. Sometimes I know that nice people, or nice people in general, I know that nice people think that if they will explain the situation, that the other person will understand, because naturally we are empathetic, so we really think that by explaining the situation the other person will understand, because if it was in our case we would, even without explanation. But sometimes it's not like that, and giving too much explanation or too many information will make the other person gain more power over us, and they will start arguing about it, and it will put us in a position which is even harder to reinforce the boundaries. So this is also one thing that I've learned recently. It's okay to enforce your boundary in a very brief and informative way without giving out too much information. That doesn't mean that you don't have to be polite. You can simply say no, and then give a small explanation without giving in too much detail. Sorry, I cannot do it at the moment. Like, it's okay to be brief. So one thing that I realized about my boundaries, and that I maybe can help, and I would really like to know if other people feel the same, is that I believe that if I endured, and if if someone else asked me to do something and it was an issue for me, or it was really uncomfortable for me, but I endured and I did it for them, first of all, they will love me more. And second of all, I would be a good person because I endured something for another person, so that means I'm a good person. But that is so toxic, and it's not true. It's okay if it made me uncomfortable, I will just do it for the other person. Basically, disrespect me, and I will make sure that I do the stuff for the other person. And then it's okay if I have to deal with the aftermath, which is me being unhappy or frustrated or unhealthy. It's okay, as long as I did it for the other person is happy, I'm a good person, so I will deal with the rest myself in silence. I believe that this usually comes from childhood, where, especially for girls, we are taught to be little quiet children because then we're good girls. And whereas maybe guys are more encouraged to be outspoken and assertive, for women it's to be more passive, and you're a good girl if you do this for this person or for that person, and it's really not right. I learned that my needs or my requests, my boundaries are not that important, or they are less important than other people's. Basically, what I'm saying is that my needs are not as important as someone else's. And once again, I know that intellectually that's not true, but it is hard to actually feel it inside and really, really feel it with your body. I was also struggling to really understand what personal power is. What do people really mean by that? To lead from your heart, but at the same time to be sovereign and really comfortable in your own self. So I was wondering, what is really personal power? Like the balanced power where you lead, where you enter a room and people can feel that you're comfortable with yourself and that you can lead, but you lead with heart. You lead with wisdom as well. So you're a good leader, but that doesn't mean you're not a human being. And I realized again that the basics is again our beliefs. So our beliefs about ourselves and about our person, standing in society and standing among other people, if we're worthy and if we don't believe we are actually allowed to have needs and to express them, and we have the right to take up space as much as we need, then we will not be able to lead from personal power because we will not have personal power. All these things about, putting other people first and being a people pleaser and always being small and shrinking yourself is definitely something that society has instilled in a lot of people, especially women. I feel we really have to balance this in order to have a healthy, happy life. So just to give you a real life example, at work, usually I would be the one writing, "I'm so sorry to bother you, but can I just ask?" And for me, it was a normal way of writing a message. It was a normal way of asking someone something because I wanted to be polite and I didn't want to, interrupt their work or just bother them. But then I realized that that's actually shrinking myself. And what people who have more confidence and personal power and self-confidence, what those people do is that they will just write, "Hello, do you have 5 minutes to talk about this?" There is no "I'm sorry to bother you." There is no "I just want to ask." There is a simple question: do you have 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it is? And you are free to say yes or no, not now. And that was such a powerful thing for me, even though it was a small one, but it was really impactful. And that's basically shrinking yourself in a nutshell. Always apologizing, always saying sorry. That's really, really bad. It makes you feel like the other person is bigger and is more important than you, and then they have the right to open the fence or jump over the fence in your house. So it's, you know, boundaries and personal power are connected. And they are really the foundation to have a healthy, happy life, to have relational fences, and to be a healthy adult. I really encourage you to think about this. It's not really thought about or talked about in school or anywhere. Some people do it naturally because they were raised in a secure environment, or because they naturally feel that they deserve. I believe that most people don't, and it's really a pity. All of us should learn to protect our energy. Drop your comments, and I would appreciate it if you like this video. Thank you so much, and see you next time.